Last week on Fill in the Blanks, I wonder if we're really setting them up to be overwhelmed by what's happening in the world.
The conflicts I had to manage when I was in high school were real conflicts. There might have been a kid who was like, I don't know, kind of a bully threatening me that I had to like worry about maybe, I don't know. I had issues with my parents. I played sports, and I had to think about like my friends or relationships. But those were real conflicts and they were limited. The conflicts that they may think they're in could be any number of things that are happening around the world: drought, famine, political unrest, body image, school shootings, any other number of things they're seeing on social media. They're not real conflicts in their lives, but they are to them.
I'm concerned that if part of our dealing with and teaching these kids about mental health is not also providing them real, genuine coping skills, real, genuine coping strategies for handling real world challenges, that we're going to put them out into a world that is a meritocracy, that is a got to get the product out the door, got to get the work done. They're going to eat them alive.
Or they're just going to be consumers forever, right? Because
exactly.
They're just setting up that system.
Yeah.
And there are programs that do really a great job with that. Common Sense Media is digital literacy for young people of all ages and starts that program really young too. We use that program at our school because they do a great job. The hardest thing, as you know, though, is that period between 12 and 25, with that second largest period of brain growth, where the brain's being flooded with dopamine. These phones are as addictive as heroin. And social media and all these other things, they just tap into, they hire some of the best neuroscientists in the world to find out how to be even more insidious to the dopamine hit that people are getting as they're going through this phase. So then in that way, I always joke with people that being an adult is really either undoing adolescence, that 12 to 25 period, or reliving it depending on your level of self-awareness, right? And that's really what we do. We're either undoing it or reliving it. But it's such a critical time period of brain growth that does set the neural pathways and habits and coping skills for them for life. And it speaks to your point of why it's important to teach it.
I really wonder what we're doing or what we can do to toughen these kids up enough that they keep their own power and not give it away to this faceless mob of social media people. We call it social media. I really wonder if it's social needia, because I think they're so needy on there that they just become addicted to this reinforcement that can be so fickle.
One thing that we do in the classroom, at least, is give them real actual scenarios that they're going to have to deal with and talk through how they can manage it differently and manage it better. I think a lot of times people think like school curriculum is just all these like lectures and, kind of talking down to people and stuff like that. I think the most effective thing I've seen with students is putting them in real situations. In one of the units we have when we talk about substance use, I'll break students into small groups. I'll walk around and be like, you've all been drinking at a party. This kid's passed out. You, the people who aren't passed out, need to discuss what you're going to do about it. And then we're going to talk about what your options are, because we have to move past this point of hoping that they're going to get these lessons or hoping that if they see a PowerPoint or a lecture, it's going to work. We have to start putting them in, hey, here's a situation. Here's what your friend's going through. Here's what you're going through. What are we actually going to do? And then to your point of making them tougher, giving them the exposure without them actually having to go through with it so that when they are in that situation, they're better prepared.
Here's the thing. If they don't put money and time allocated in the curriculum to do what you're talking about, then it's not going to happen. Raising awareness is bullshit. You've got to actually put the money in to develop the curriculum that you're talking about, have developed and are continuing to develop. And then instead of having like homeroom where they sit in there and stare at each other, just even 20 minutes 3 times a week, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah.
that they're doing where they can talk about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This is what mental health is. These are the things that you need to be aware of. And every one of those kids then becomes an ambassador for those who didn't get that.
Right.
And they go to college and they recognize it, and they can pull somebody to the side and say, hey, people ask me a lot of times, how do you get past the defensiveness? You go say, hey, you need help. People don't react well to that. And I've always said, if you'll replace the word need with deserve, it makes all the difference in the world. If you'll go to somebody and say, it seems to me that you're having a hard time and you deserve some peace, you deserve some happiness, there are some people available that can help you enjoy that, that it really takes a lot of the defensiveness down. Every one of these classes that you're sharing that with, these 250,000 people, they're all ambassadors. They go out and impact 10 people, then that's 2.5 million. If they impact 100, it just grows. It's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It's like evidence-based therapies. This isn't about a teacher taking the time to go in and tell some war stories about their life. It's about going through a curriculum that has empirical data supporting the fact that this does teach the child, the teenager, whatever, information they need to recognize and react to situations in a timely way.
100%. Because when I talk about my own experiences with, attempting to take my own life, it's not about me. It's about using my story to get them to think about the choices and the decisions that they're making in their lives. And this is a practice that we developed. So I became the director of outreach at the National Mental Health Awareness Campaign in 2002. The National Mental Health Awareness Campaign, you probably remember, was launched by the Clinton administration in '99, and it was the first public health approach to mental health. So what a lot of people don't know is from 2002 to 2006, we went out and researched what were the most effective, responsible ways for people to share their stories about mental health. And I worked with researchers at NIMH, and I worked with people who were in, really high levels, mental health professionals, so that we were doing it responsibly. And then we were able to launch the first Youth Mental Health Awareness Speakers Bureau based off of the evidence-based ways of how you actually share your story in a way that allows people to think about their own lives. So not only are you saying it from a perspective of not being war stories, Dr. Phil, this is something we have practiced for 2 decades. This isn't new. This isn't us coming out of left field and being like, hey, let's do this. The same trainings that I did to create the first large-scale mental health presentations in this country are what we're doing with teachers today. It's not something that we're just throwing at the wall.
These college kids now that have an attitude where I guess about 2013, 2014, was kind of the first time they started medicalizing their complaints. They started saying, this professor said some things I disagreed with that hurt me, made me feel unsafe, made me whatever. So we've seen more professors dismissed from student complaints in the last several years than we've seen since the McCarthy era from students complaining. Now, I haven't studied these on a case-by-case basis, although I've looked at several. Not all professors are great. Some of them probably cross some lines, but a lot of them, it was ideological. It had to do with asking students to take the law enforcement side in the George Floyd situation, or a side that was contrary to their core beliefs, which I thought was how you learned, how you resolved cognitive dissonance, how you looked at the other side, how you broadened your scope. And studies show anywhere between 15 and 30% of students think it's okay to yell down a speaker on campus that you disagree with. Stunning to me.
Yeah, it's a big change. Yeah.
A big change. Are we coddling them too much?
And what's the line between coddling and empowering, right?
Exactly.
Because at some point you want them to speak up. You know, there are certain issues in our society today that are based on people's identity markers, and if you have an identity marker that is getting legislated or changed that's out of your control, you want them to feel empowered to be like, hey, this isn't right, and I want to change. But on the flip side, you also want them to understand that there are different perspectives, there are different viewpoints that impact your life, and how do you balance those two? In the cases you're sharing, it sounds like we're going to an extreme in one way of not just empowering. We're coddling to the point of like, you don't ever have to face this or realize this or experience this.
I've always said, I don't think we should have a cancel culture. I think we should have a counsel culture.
Mm.
I try to have both sides of issues on my platform here and give everybody an opportunity to speak their mind to a limit. I'm not going to have KKK hate mongers on here. That maybe is the other side, but they're going to have to go somewhere else to
shows have done that,
to talk about that. Yeah, that to me is just sensationalizing, and I'm not going to do that. But there can be two sides of an issue. Even homelessness, there's two sides of the issue. There are those that think home first, and then those think, no, we got to get people earning the right to do this, and I'll have both sides on, and they're very respectful and talk about it. But then there are those who just say, thank you for having me on and talking about this, but I can't understand why you let those people come here and talk about this. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not going to have just you and your side here talking about it. It really comes a lot from young people, college people, that I wonder what they're going to face when they get out there. I wonder if they're going to be coming back to their college saying, I paid you to prepare me and you didn't do it.
That'll be interesting to see. And
Yeah.
It will. And, you know, I think there are a lot of young people too that I see who, you know, there's these issues where their identity marker is something they can't change. And they've had a really negative experience, and they do want to feel like someone in a power structure supports them. You know, sexual assault's a huge one. And sexual assault on college campuses have gone up significantly. There's a great organization called It's On Us that tries to prevent sexual assault. And when I have conversations with, especially young women, the amount of young women who've been sexually harassed by 7th grade is shocking. And we almost normalize it to a point where they're kind of told like, well, this is the society you live in, and this is what you're expected to just stomach or take. So I do think there's this growing hope that for some people, they think like, hey, if I speak up about this, something is going to change. And I think in some ways you're seeing colleges say, yeah, it's going to change. We'll just get rid of these people. But that doesn't change it. That doesn't change their experience of being sexually harassed at such a young age, or having people be sexually assaulted with no consequences. So I'm choosing just a specific issue here. You were talking about political ideology. I think that this is that line between coddling and empowering. I want the students I see to be speaking up and taking action in the ways they are, but it can't go so far where it's taking away someone thinks they're solving the problem, but they're not actually solving the problem. They're not even addressing it.
We need to prepare them to cope with what they're going to have to deal with when they get into the world, because it is competitive, and we got to give them the coping skills, not just feed them to the machine, and then they get overwhelmed by all of those demands, judgments, exclusions, or whatever, and they go, I have no coping skills, which is why I was so fascinated by what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I think that is what's giving them the opportunity to learn how to not give their power away, how to recognize when they're overwhelmed, raise their hand, and ask for the help that they need. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's real.
Yeah.
We can change the world, but in the meantime, you've got to survive in it. That's the key. And we got to prepare them for the next level of life, and that's the next level of life. Well, let me ask you this in closing. Given that we do have so many more young people today that are experiencing pathological levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, problems with mental and emotional well-being, What is your advice to parents to help keep these kids safe and to get them on as solid ground as possible? You got a bunch of parents listening right now. As the wellness director, what would be your best advice to parents?
It's a couple of key things. Number one, know your family history. So, I think I was 27 when I sat down with my parents and asked, hey, did anyone else in our family have a mental health disorder? And I'm not even exaggerating. Like 18 minutes later, they stopped naming people.
You go, hey, thanks for telling me.
You're like, okay, so there's two parts of knowing your family history. One is if you have mental health disorders or addiction in your family, you need to be extra vigilant because that is one of the biggest determining factors of if your kids are going to have it.
Yeah.
And then after knowing your family history, know more about those disorders so that you can spot them earlier on. So that if you see outbursts in behavior that are persistent as a kid, well, like maybe it's bigger than just that emotional development or that milestone. So knowing your family history has to be first and foremost.
What a good point.
Go outside and take a family walk and make sure it's something you do, even if they push back, because the second you give it on a boundary, a kid learns how to manipulate you. Being a child is really just trying to figure out how to manipulate parents into doing what you want. And if you don't have boundaries for what you are prioritizing as mental health, well, of course they're going to get out of it. So that's an important piece. The next piece is take care of yourself because no one else is going to. I think, at least in my experience, and I don't have the experience of reaching as many people as you have, but I have spoken to over 2 million people in person. And the amount of parents who are in a dark place, who have a kid who doesn't want to admit they have a problem, who doesn't want to accept it, and is staying up, all hours of the night because they're worried that kid's not going to come home, is a really common situation right now. My dad used to tell this gut-wrenching story where he would say he got to a point where he was convinced that one night it was just going to be the police at the door telling him I was dead. And in those moments, he knew that he had to take care of his mental health. That if he didn't take care of his mental health, much like the oxygen mask on a plane, he wasn't going to be able to give back to me. And so he always left the door open. And he had let me know, like, hey, here's what's available to you. I care about you. I love you. And his hope was to not lose himself in the process. And I don't think parents are able to have enough time to do that. But it's got to be a priority, even if it's 15 minutes. Even if it's 30 minutes of joy. And if you are in a marriage, a relationship, a partnership, taking time for each other too, so that you can maintain that partnership and not lose it amidst everything that's happening with the kids. My oldest brother has bipolar disorder and was in a psychiatric ward throughout his college experience. I had my own struggles, and my parents never stopped going on dates. They never stopped taking a 1 or 2 day vacation. They never stopped trying to maintain what kept them strong because they wanted to maintain that for the family. And yeah, sometimes it was strange, but for the most part, I get what they were trying to do. So that would be my advice. Know your family history, know what to look for, try to have conversations versus confrontations, model the mental health you want to see, and take care of yourself.
Well, that's a damn good checklist. And I always tell parents, talk to your kids about things that don't matter, because you'll open those lines of communication which you need when it comes time to talk about things that do matter. If they can talk about video games or sports or music or whatever, you don't want to talk to your child for the first time when it really counts. Get that line of communication open. And I always use the analogy, it's like when you go to the ER, what's the first thing they do? You hear them on TV all the time say, give me an IV with Ringer's lactate. That's just opening a line. So when you figure out what you do need, you can plug it in.
Right.
That's what you got to do with your kids communication-wise. Get the line open, and when it comes time to talk about something that matters, you've got an open line.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to have those boundaries.
Yeah, boy.
I think technology and boundaries for parents has really been a struggle because, if you give the kid that device, you're going to probably get to sleep.
Yeah.
But the device can't be the parent.
Yeah, we don't want electronic babysitters. We used to do it with TVs. Now we're doing it with devices.
Yeah.
Can't be. Well, what a great, great conversation. I'm going to put this on the website. I'm going to take the things that you just said, turn them into a list, put them on the website so people can go look at them and have that list, because it is very prescriptive about what people need to do. And I'm so inspired by what you're doing in teaching these kids. And if there's anything I can do to help, you tell me.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm inspired by what you're doing. That's what I told you that day when we were together. And I could spend 3 more hours talking to you. So I'm going to stalk you and get you back over here again.
I'm ready.
So we can pick up and talk more about this. We have this crisis right now, and I think it is an epidemic, and we're going to have to do something about it. We haven't even talked about the developmental issues that kids are having because of the academic gaps, and what we're going to have to do to close that, and what it's going to cause when it starts to obtain mentally and emotionally, and how kids learn about themselves and form their self-image and self-esteem. There are so many more things that we can talk about, but we'll do that in part 2. How's that? We'll hit that soon.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Really, thank you for coming. Very, very helpful, very important. I love this conversation.
Thanks.
All right, guys, that's it for today.
All right. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. Sorry to keep you so long, but I just didn't want to take anything out.
It's fine. You have such a depth of knowledge of all this stuff. It's super impressive. Really impressive to be able to manage everything you manage and know the specifics of like school. That's impressive. I talk to a lot of people who are in schools who don't know as much as you were talking about.
Well, I'm very passionate about this. I didn't know if you knew I was serious that day when I said, we've got to talk some more, but that's why I was after you.
Yeah.
So, I'm serious when I say I want to do this again.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to come and see the school, please come.
I would love to.
My students all watched the episode. The school promoted it, so they were all excited.
Yeah.
And asked them endless questions like, what was it like?
Well, I was frustrated that some people took up our time. I wanted us to talk more.
Yeah.
And I would like to do this some more. I'm very passionate about all this because there's so much to talk about.
There is. Well,
it's too important.
I think the best thing you've done for this country is you've made mental health approachable. You are beamed into, my aunt watches you, my dad's sister, she watches you every single day. And she said, you have taken these concepts that are so difficult for people to understand and you've made it relatable and understandable. And that's what I try to do in the classroom, is look at that model and how can we make this a part of education. So, I think what you have blazed the trails for this in so many ways and talking about how it can happen in the classroom is a natural bridge. So I appreciate it. People have promised me things endlessly over the past 20 years of me doing this work. You're the first one who's actually been like, I'm going to follow up and make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm not from Hollywood. I'm not a let's do lunch guy. I'm from Texas. And I say, let's do lunch. I mean, let's go get something to eat.
Here's food.
Yeah.